BC Conservative Dan Albas is one of the MPs raising concerns over the past week on this issue. Mr. Albas, good to see you.
Thanks for having me.
So let's just start with this. Canadians can see how the process for oral questions takes place during question period every day, with MPs questioning ministers directly. Take us through how MPs use written questions.
Yes, so an order paper question is quite a different process than question period, where you have political parties establishing key themes, establishing their narratives, and dueling them out, and that's what we call a democracy. However, an order paper question is meant to supplement that so that we have a basis of facts. So when a member of parliament writes a question, the public servants that ultimately review and then answer the question try to be factual as possible. Now, these facts are incredibly important to our democracy, because if a particular department has spent money or has hired public servants or has let public servants go, those form the basis of the facts that we can then have debates on. And when the order paper questions suddenly receive a political lens at the front, well, then that is a distortion that I think needs to be called out.
Okay, so then let's talk about what the crux is of the issue that you and your colleagues have raised. I know you spoke to a question of privilege raised by your colleague, Michelle Rempel-Garner. Take us through what the issue is that you're having, especially with the Department of Natural Resources.
Well, first of all, let me highlight her work. Michelle Rempel-Garner certainly is a big advocate for transparency coming from this government. She's served as a government minister in the past, so she knows how these systems work. And she filed an order paper question and then followed up with an access to information request, where she actually was able to pull out a series of order paper questions, including one that I had on canceled contracts by government agencies and departments. And she actually found the political notes where, in this case, Natural Resources Canada decided they would use a language limitation. So essentially, in my order paper question, they decided not to disclose certain contracts for whatever reason. I don't know if it's because they were sensitive or they'd be embarrassed, or if they just did not want to behave like a good steward of taxpayer money. But essentially, they decided to not disclose. And in that order paper question, access to information request that Michelle Rempel-Garner did, they actually said specifically, we're worried there is a risk that other departments will follow and be honest and forthright. And then we, by comparison, may risk looking bad because we haven't disclosed as much. But they decided that they would still use this limitation language, where essentially they're withholding information, those facts I spoke about earlier, Andrew, that are so fundamental towards transparency and proper debate. So by, in effect, doing so, they made a political decision to not allow the public to have that information, to not allow members of parliament to have that information, or the press to have that information, so we can actually discuss public policy from a basis of fact. So, and essentially, it's a very Orwellian term, this language limitation, and it's my worry that this kind of thinking will spread to other departments, and fundamentally the order paper question will be meaningless, because essentially we'd be just asking for press releases written by government communication staff.
Okay, now the government says information was provided to maintain the security of sensitive information. Do you think you're being treated differently as a Conservative, as an opposition member, when you're putting these questions to the government now?
Well, Natural Resources Canada can say what they want, but it says specifically in the communications bar that they chose to limit specific contracts from even being disclosed. So they actually didn't say, hey, there are some contracts that because of national security reasons, we're not going to disclose. In fact, they just chose not to. And again, they actually said the risk here is we will actually stand out for not having submitted like other departments and agencies. And again, let's come back to the reason why we do this. It's because in Canada, we believe in responsible government. That means that members of parliament are able to hold the executive, in this case, the prime minister and his cabinet, for the decisions that they make. Again, if we can't have the basic facts coming from government, if government can apply a communications lens before those facts so they omit things, that is not democratic, that is not transparent, and I don't think it's Canadian. So this is a very harmful thing, I think, for the system of government and its lack of respect for the parliament and its functioning. And I think that we need to go farther than simply just rebuking public servants to do better. This is, as I said, an Orwellian type of thinking that once it invades departments, will neutralize, in fact, allow governments just to simply say, we're exempt from public accountability altogether. That's incredibly dangerous, in my opinion.
Okay, so let's finish on this then, because the Speaker, as you know, did say this is not, in his view, not a question of privilege for your rights as an MP, but he does say MPs deserve better answers from the government, that he wants ministers to have their officials deliver better information. How do you move forward now? What would be your next step in putting more pressure on the government?
Well, this is a disturbing pattern that we are seeing from this government. In fact, the Trudeau government, we have Marco Medicino, who says he didn't find out about the transfer of Paul Bernardo when his staff knew for 3 months. We have Bill Blair, the minister previous of public safety, saying that he did not receive briefings about Michael Chong. And so when we have where political staff are actually gaming the system behind the scenes to try and keep the government information that they don't want disclosed or to have discussions about, when they're actually trying to stop Parliament from being able to complete its functions of holding the government to account for its actions, that's extremely dangerous. I'd hope that the Speaker would go farther than what he did. Obviously, he has tradition and previous rulings to go into, but that's why I am pulling the alarm, the fire alarm here on this, because if other departments start doing this to other members of Parliament, then the whole mechanism of order paper questions, and I say this specifically to Liberal backbenchers, because if you're not in government, suddenly you will have the same process being done to you by other governments that you disagree with. So, I just want to have a fair process where members of Parliament can do their jobs, and public servants should not be bypassing parliamentary obligations like order paper questions to make their communication strategies easier. We should be giving people the facts and then letting democracy happen, letting those debates happen in Parliament.
Okay, we'll have to leave it there. Conservative MP Dan Albas, thank you once again for your time.
Thank you.